The heavy cruiser USS Indianapolis cut through the dark Pacific Ocean after completing a secret mission. Just days earlier, the ship had delivered components for what would become the atomic bomb. Now it was sailing alone. No escort. No warning. Shortly after midnight, a Japanese submarine spotted the ship. 2 torpedoes were launched. The first slammed into the bow. The second detonated near the fuel tanks. Within minutes, the ship began to roll violently. Sailors were thrown from bunks and ladders as explosions ripped through the hull. Fires spread quickly. Men scrambled for life jackets as the ship tilted harder and harder. Then the unimaginable happened. USS Indianapolis sank in just 12 minutes. Nearly 900 sailors were thrown into the Pacific Ocean. No lifeboats, very few rafts, and no one knew they were missing. The survivors drifted into groups, clinging to floating debris and life jackets. At first, many believed rescue would come quickly. Ships did not simply vanish without notice. Someone would come. Someone had to come. But morning arrived with nothing but empty horizon. The Pacific stretched endlessly in every direction. The sun rose higher. The heat became unbearable. Salt water burned their eyes and lips. Men began to realize something terrible. No distress signal had been received. They were alone. By the second day, dehydration began to take its toll. Some sailors drank seawater in desperation. At first, it seemed to help. But soon, hallucinations began. Men started shouting about islands that didn't exist. Others swore they could see ships just over the horizon. They swam away from their groups and disappeared. Then the sharks arrived. At first, they were only shadows beneath the water, dark shapes circling far below. Oceanic white-tip sharks, one of the most aggressive shark species in the open ocean. Drawn by the explosions, debris, and the scent of blood, the sailors tried to stay close together. They knew isolated men were more vulnerable, but the sharks were patient. Hours would pass without an attack. Then suddenly a scream would pierce the silence. A sailor would be pulled under. The water would turn red, and the sharks would vanish again into the depths. Night was even worse. In the darkness, no one could see what was beneath them. Men felt bumps against their legs. Something brushing past. Something circling. Some sailors tried to keep each other awake. They knew sleep meant slipping beneath the surface. Others simply stopped responding. Their bodies floated silently beside the living. By the third day, the psychological collapse began. Groups broke apart. Arguments turned violent. Some men removed their life jackets, convinced land was nearby. Others drifted away, chasing hallucinations. The ocean had become a prison without walls. Hunger gnawed at them. Thirst consumed them. And every splash in the water sent waves of panic through the survivors. On the 4th day, something changed. One of the sailors looked up and saw something moving across the sky. At first, he thought it was another hallucination, but the sound grew louder. An American patrol plane had spotted the survivors. Rescue ships were dispatched immediately. When help finally arrived, only 316 sailors were still alive. More than 500 had died in the water, some from dehydration, some from exposure, and many from sharks. It remains one of the worst naval disasters in United States history. But survivors later said something chilling. The sharks were not the worst part. It was the waiting, the endless horizon, and the realization that no one knew they were out there. Because in the open ocean, the most dangerous moment isn't when the ship sinks. It's the moment you realize rescue may never come. The sun dipped low in the sky on the 4th day, casting an eerie glow across the vast expanse of water. The survivors squinted into the shimmering distance, hope flickering like a candle in the wind. As the shadows lengthened, the noise of the approaching plane grew closer, a distinct roar slicing through the agonizing silence. Instinctively, the men gathered together, hearts racing, as they waved their arms and shouted with whatever strength remained. The sight of potential rescue became a beacon, igniting a spark of life in their exhausted bodies. Hope mingled with fear. After days of solitude, they dared to believe. But even as the plane approached, a sinking dread loomed over them, a thought trailing in the back of their minds. Could this be another false hope? Another mirage driving them into madness? Their voices hoarse from shouting, men struggled to maintain the fueling sense of urgency, casting aside disbelief for the briefest of moments. With every beat of their hearts, they clung to the faith that salvation was within reach. The plane's silhouette grew larger against the dying light, and they began to shout their names, their voices merging into a desperate chorus that rang out over the water. The roar of the plane became deafening, reverberating through the waves like the distant thunder of salvation finally approaching. The men waved frantically, hands trembling with a mix of desperation and anticipation, tears mingling with the salt water on their sunburned faces. They could hardly believe their eyes, the promise of hope hurtling toward them through the fading light. Every second felt like an eternity, but as the plane swooped closer, a shadow of doubt lingered, whispering fears of rejection and more unbearable waiting. The crew inside the aircraft scoured the restless ocean below, searching for signs of life amid the vast emptiness as the survivors pointed, cried out, pleading for recognition. Each moment could tip them from despair to escape, a lifeline thrown into the abyss, glimmering with the possibility of rescue. The plane's crew spotted the frantic movements and the desperation in the men's eyes, a wave of shock washing over them. They descended lower, circling the struggling sailors, their hearts racing as they confirmed what they saw. Official protocols flipped through the minds of the aviators, urgency pressed against their chests. They had to act quickly, lives depended on them. A message was relayed to the command ship. Each second felt monumental as the survivors watched intently, believing that salvation was finally at hand. In that moment of shared hope, they felt a collective breath. Perhaps their suffering would soon end, and they'd live to tell the tale of survival against unimaginable odds. The aircraft finally swooped lower, static crackling over the radio as the crew urgently coordinated with the ships waiting afar. Rescue vessels surged toward them like mirages rising from the water, cutting through the waves to reach the beleaguered men. As the planes climbed higher, its engines roaring in triumph, the sailors felt an almost palpable shift. Hope transformed into raw energy, empowering them to fight against the shadows that had haunted them for days. Unable to contain their energy, voices rose in a crescendo, stories and names spilling forth in a chaotic harmony of emotion, the thrill of life intertwining with the sorrow of loss. Those who remained held tight to their lifelines, visions of home and family igniting their spirits, bolstered by the knowledge they had not vanished into the void. Amid the chaos, a few men broke from the group, migrating toward the distant outline of rescue boats. They could not wait any longer. Each heartbeat felt like a drum beating out their fate, guiding them toward salvation as their stubborn wills rallied against the ocean's depths. The sailors could see the rescuers now, figures on a bow, radiant with promise, as hope surged brighter than ever within them. The rescue boats angled through the surf, cutting the waves with urgency, and as they drew closer, the weary sailors erupted into a frenzy of elation. Cheers echoed across the water, drowning out thoughts of despair as rescue crews leaned over the sides, reaching for the first men. Gripped by joy and disbelief, they pulled the survivors aboard, the warmth of human contact igniting a fire of survival against the coldness of the ocean. Though the ordeal left deep scars, the survivors emerged with an unbreakable bond, forged through shared suffering and undying hope. They returned to the shore not just as sailors, but as testaments to the endurance of the human spirit, forever changed by the depths of the ocean.